Alright, hello, I'm Brandon Carew, and I did my research project on should college athletes be paid. So I would say that this is probably one of the most controversial topics in America in the past decade. I personally think it stems from just the fact that the NCAA is making an absurd amount of money and people are finally realizing how much money they're making. For example, just this year they cleared $1 billion in total revenue, which is just completely absurd. My main argument in my paper is that these student athletes aren't really students. They're athletes first. I think the NCAA has their priorities all mixed up, one because of how much money they're making and bringing in, that they want these student athletes to be athletes first, and they don't really care about the student part. Just for example, two examples, let's just say you're an 18-year-old, you signed at UTSA for basketball, you come in, you have no idea what you want to do for the rest of your life. You don't know what you want to major in. So, you ask your coach, you're like, hey, coach, what do you think I should major in? He's most likely going to tell you to do the easiest degree possible. An athletic director, when they sign you up for classes, they're going to try to sign you up for all online classes. Once again, their priorities are all mixed up. They're thinking about athletics first instead of, the education these kids are getting, which should be priority number one. Also, the amount of, just another example of how their priorities are all mixed up is, how much practice hours these kids have to go through. A day can go from, 8 a.m. practice, 8 a.m. run to, another practice at 11. And then after that, you got to lift. And after that, you have another practice. You might be doing 2-a-days. And then, 8 p.m., after you've had the longest day possible, they're like, okay, yeah, now you can have study hall for an hour where you're pretty much just be resting your body because you've been practicing all day. These coaches, the athletic director, they're really able to dictate these student athletes' life, which is not really what I think. That's not a good thing. These kids, it should be athletics second, education first. They should be a student athlete. It comes first. My next point I'm going to dive into is the free education that they receive. It goes along with my other point that it really isn't an education when they're having a focus on athletics. But my main point here is that yes, a scholarship is amazing and it can cover so much money and whatnot, but what they don't tell you is the money that it doesn't cover. Now a scholarship can range anywhere from $30,000 to $200,000 depending on what university you're attending, what sport and stuff like that. But what they don't tell you is that even if it is a full scholarship, there are expenses that you might have to pay. Student athletes might have to pay for living expenses, which, the living expenses alone, and then you add utilities and all sorts of that on top of that. Their parents are going to have to pay anywhere from $8,000 to $12,000 a year, which I know isn't much, but for some of these kids, they don't come from a household that, their parents have that type of money. So you're doing these kids a disservice, and you're portraying, the NCAA is portraying that these are free educations when it isn't. So I say we just start paying these kids, which I'll get into in a second. So actually I'm going to get into it right now. So the money. So I'd say I'm going to use college basketball as my first example. I would say in the past decade or so we've really seen the one and done movement in basketball, college basketball really grow. And what the one and done movement is you have these freshmen come in, they're there in school for a year, then they're out and they declare for the NBA draft. The reason why they're doing this is one, because the contracts that the NBA signed with ESPN, the TV deal that completely boosted every player's contract. The rookie contracts in the NBA right now are absurd amount of money. So what you have is these kids that are coming in and they're not focused. They're just completely focused on basketball. They're not focused on their school. They know they're going to be there for a year. So I think this has to change. I think one and done has to change, and I think it's going to. I think Adam Silver, the NBA commissioner, is working on it right now, which is a good thing. It's either that or you got to start paying these kids. Now I'm going to get into the numbers. All right, so I'm going to use the basketball again. I'm going to use the Duke 2015 national championship team. So that team in 2015, they generated $33.7 million of revenue. itself, which went completely to the university. Well, 6 million of it went to Coach K because that's his salary. So you have like $28 million going to the university. What I think Duke should do is they should be forced, to give some of that to their players who earned it, who, are logging these long practice hours, putting athletics first like they've been told. I think that a portion of that should go to these students. A way that you could do that is, it's hard. It is a hard solution, but my solution is that I understand, women's athletic. If you pay one, you can't just pay football and basketball. You got to pay for everyone. Which leads me into my next point. So this is going to bring in football and these TV deals that the conferences have made. So you see like the Pac-12, the Big 12, I mean, they're signing like $80 million TV deals, which once again is going strictly to the university. What I think should happen is you should give a portion of that to these student athletes. You can divide it up equally. I understand that women's softball may not make them as much revenue as, football, especially you use Alabama as an example. Their football team is going to have the most revenue out of the whole athletic department. But that doesn't mean that just because the women's softball doesn't make as much revenue that they don't deserve it, because they're having to log those hours just as much. They're having to, they're practicing from 8 to 5, it's a full-time job. Everyone deserves a portion of it. So I think you could divide it. I mean, $80 million, that could go straight. I mean, that's a TV deal. That can go straight to these student athletes. Divide it up equally, and that's my solution. Because it's already a huge amount of money. $80 million on a TV deal. Duke basketball, 33. I mean, that's almost $100 million. You can divide that in your athletic department to have people making money completely. And one of the main arguments that everyone wants to use is that, they're amateurs. I think it's completely false now. I think amateurism is just outdated. I think the way that the NCAA is been modeled is not in the amount of money that they're bringing in. They are using these kids, and amateurism is just outdated. NCAA is making way too much money, and these kids, 18-year-olds, they deserve this money. They are the ones out there putting in the work. So, I think they deserve some sort of money. So like I said, this is my solution. I think you have to split up the total amount of revenue that the whole athletic department gets. However you want to divide it up. But these kids need to start getting paid. They need to start staying in school. College basketball, they need to be in school. We need to focus on being a student first, not athletes. Which brings me to my conclusion. The problem with college sports right now is the university and the NCAA are just making an absurd amount of money, and they don't really care. They don't care that these athletes are having to log so many hours a day. All they care about is that money. I think that we need to take a step back. They need to take a step back and realize that we are shaping the men and women of our future, and we need to be. Education should be priority number one. Growing up, education for me was priority number two, right behind. I'm a Catholic, so right behind God. And growing up, that's just how it was. Sports was always after family. So I think the NCAA needs to get their priorities straight. And I think it's going in the right direction. This whole paying players is really picking up steam. It'll be interesting what happens in the next couple of years. Thank you.